child was on the Snapchat and dealer reached out with a colorful menu of drug choices. And it turns out that the drugs that our son ordered and had delivered to our home like a pizza were not drugs at all. What he ordered wasn't in there. It was just fentanyl.
Just pure fentanyl, 100%.
Yeah.
On February 7th of 2021, a drug dealer reached out to 16-year-old Sammy Chapman on Snapchat and delivered a deadly dose of fentanyl to his home. His parents, Dr. Laura Berman, a nationally known relationship expert and TV host, along with her husband, Sam Chapman, are doing all they can to warn parents and hold social media companies accountable.
Well, a really important part of my grief journey was letting go of that vengeance, that need to punish, and trying to turn it into warning parents, because I knew that so many parents did not understand the dangers of fentanyl and the dangers of social media.
I'm your host, Angela Kennecke. Sam Chapman joins me for this episode of Grieving Out Loud to talk about how his family has coped with Sammy's death and what they're doing to not only educate parents, but also to require more from social media companies. Well, Sam, I wish similar circumstances didn't bring us together. I'm very grateful to meet you, and I'm so very sorry for the loss of Sammy.
Thank you.
It's been a little more than a year since Sammy died.
That's right. February 7th, Super Bowl Sunday.
How are you doing? How are you doing? How is your family doing?
Well, we've had good help. And we're past the first year mark. The first year is the hardest, and you just have to sort of take it, 1 hour at a time. But now after the first year passes, you start to sort of get back into life. And the sadness comes in waves that are further apart. I do have PTSD, I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of it not being as bad as it once was. So that fades too, hopefully goes all the way away one day. But, I was there when he died and tried to resuscitate him and did not succeed. So that is a freak out and a half, along with all the other sorrow and pain.
Right. It's just one more thing. I almost think people who didn't get to their child's body, so to speak, have it better off, because for me, I ran through a police barricade, to get into her apartment and saw my daughter laying on the ground where the EMTs were working on her. And that was bad enough. I mean, you were there before the EMTs. I know that in Sammy's case.
Mm-hmm.
That image is just burned into my mind, and it comes back oftentimes when I don't expect it to. Do you find that to be the case too?
Right. And in the places where I was most creative, where your mind sort of goes blank and all of those wonderful business thoughts and stuff that I did well would just come flooding in. Now images of his death and reminders that he's dead flow in. So like in the shower, when there's just white noise, all of these wonderful creative ideas used to come. And now I don't even like taking, I do still take my showers, but I don't like it because those thoughts come rushing back in the gray space.
Being alone in the car too, I think that's a big place for me as well.
Or in the middle of the night, whenever you wake up and you have the dawning that that's your new reality, or still your reality, as it is the case after over a year's gone by.
I'm about 3 years ahead of you in this journey, and I felt that the first year was just shock. Like and I almost feel like the trauma and everything you've been through almost causes like a brain damage. It's so overwhelming and so hard to explain to people, kind of where you're at. And the second year was hard too, because I think reality sets in that our child isn't coming back. And so year two was really difficult for me. And I'm not trying to say this to make you feel more discouraged. I just think that, I'm so sorry. I just feel like, but
I was
once
having a good year too up until right now.
yeah. Well, everyone is different, that's for sure, and everyone handles grief differently. But as I think as time goes on, yes, you're right. The spaces between the waves of grief lengthen. And but the reality that this is something you will always carry with you settles in, I think.
Right.
That probably remains the same no matter how many years go by.
Right. It's sort of like a part of you is broken. You're walking
Yes.
around a lot or a little bit broken, and that'll never go away. You know, I will say this: as we get older, the people we love die, and so it's not supposed to be our children, but this sort of catastrophe is something that people have to live through. Your spouse may pass away before you do, and you know, obviously your parents do, your siblings may, these things are part of life. And so I try and realize that there's nothing I can do about it. I do have purpose, and I have to, pledge myself to that purpose and try to voluntarily leave as much behind as I can of this pain and suffering.
I want to pick up what you were just talking about. That is one thing. Death had never really touched me other than a grandparent before the loss of my daughter. And I think about that a lot, how none of us are guaranteed another day on this planet. And we are all going to lose people we love. It shouldn't be our children, for sure.
Right.
But what we do with our lives, I think it brings it into focus, right?
We've had a lot of help from a man named David Kessler, who is a grief specialist and has a wonderful set of resources at grief.com for any of your people who are going through this and need to hook up with some expert advice. And, some of the things that he taught my family were that everybody grieves differently and not to judge each other for doing it differently. And nobody does it wrong, right? And the other one was on the second guessing, which, as you know, we do in our heads over and over again. And his words were that whatever you think you could have or should have done differently, there's a family out there that did it that way and lost their child too. And so there's just no getting around the fact that, second guessing is not going to be successful and is really something to be limited if you can. And, guilt, if you didn't beat your child, the guilt is also something that we can work to shed. You're going to experience it, but it's unlike the sadness, which you can't really work to shed because it's an authentic emotion. The guilt you can work to shed because they are their own beings. They are responsible for their choices and actions.
I love what you just said, that you learned that whatever you thought you could have done, another family did it and it didn't work. And I noticed from all the interviews I've done just on this podcast alone and in my work as a journalist, there is so much truth to that. No matter what we tried to do or did or didn't do, it still could have happened anyway, and it does to other families.
So we had so many people hear our story and reach out to us that we had to make a receptacle for it. So we put a Facebook group together, and now there are 13,000 members, all of whom have had some sort of, social media related child death or fentanyl poisoning. And in our case, those were the two factors at play. Were fentanyl poisoning and delivery via Snapchat.
The other thing that you and I have in common, our families have in common, is because of how famous your wife is. The story went national, international. Because of my role in the media, Emily's story went national and even international, not on the scale, of course, that Sammy's was, but still, that kind of attention is unique. And I wonder what you think maybe the good things and the bad things are that went along with all of that notoriety over what happened to your child.
Yeah, well, so the only good thing that we've been able to honestly produce is warning other parents about the dangers of fentanyl poisoning and social media. The rest of it, is to be seen. right? We're trying to get a law passed that requires social media platforms with children on them to integrate with parent monitoring software like Bark. What we've experienced is the Biden administration probably wouldn't sign something like that because social media people are part of his administration, were part of his campaign, and are big fans of the president. And the lawmakers love to complain about this and held hearings about it, and then it's much ado about nothing, right? So all we've been able to do is let parents know, get your social media account names from your children and their passwords and make it a quid pro quo for having the devices. That's all you can do. And then if they don't come home at 1 a.m, you can reach out to their friends. You can go see whatever messages may have just happened that could give you some clues. Be in touch with their friends as well. Put the shout out, where's my Sammy? It's 2 a.m. and we're scared.
Right. Let's back up just a little bit and talk about what happened in Sammy's case for those that don't know, and how he got the fentanyl laced pill. So you can understand why we dove right into talking about social media, but I want people to know a little bit more about the background. He was only 16 years old. Had he started experimenting a little bit before then?
So he had tried marijuana, and we had gotten him counseling for it, and we're testing him. So this was his first foray into anything stronger than that. In our town in Los Angeles, fentanyl poisoning, because we're a border state, the fentanyl poisoning is rampant. Where kids used to experiment with drugs and learn it wasn't a good thing and stop a year or two later or whatever, growing up. What happened with us, 10% of them get killed with fentanyl poisoning. It's turned into the leading cause of death among adults 18 to 45 in this country. So it's bigger than COVID, it's bigger than heart attacks or car accidents, and it's a crisis. And so we've been trying to raise the volume on that crisis and let people know that 2 grains of salt worth of fentanyl is enough to kill you. What's happening now is that China is sending it in. They were sending it directly into our country, and the Trump administration made it a huge point of their relationship with China to end that. They just started sending it to Mexico, and Mexico is forming it to fake narcotics. They're using the open border to mule across pure fentanyl and lace everything from cocaine to marijuana. So unless you're buying something at a dispensary, any drug dealer per se is likely to have lethal products. And that's what happened to us. Our child was on the Snapchat, and dealer reached out with a colorful menu of drug choices. And it turns out that the drugs that our son ordered and had delivered to our home like a pizza were not drugs at all. What he ordered wasn't in there. It was just fentanyl. And
just pure fentanyl, 100%.
Yeah. We started on this saga of trying to figure out what happened. And that's a whole nother issue, how they don't help law enforcement. Law enforcement has sort of given up on some of these cases, and district attorneys aren't prosecuting them.
Now, in Sammy's case, did he have any other previous contact with this dealer, or did the dealer find him on Snapchat? Do you have any idea how that happened?
Right. This was the way they do it is they find someone at the school. They search good neighborhoods. There are all these locator devices on Snapchat. And so they find areas like we live in Santa Monica that are populated with rich kids, and they network among those kids and set up profiles that make them 16 years old so that they can be in, and so this was his first experience with this person, and we went on right away to warn the families. When my wife went on her Instagram and showed the colorful menu and said, watch out, and then people started passing it around. The police showed up, and we said, let's order something right now and have the guy come to the house, come on in, close the door, move your cars. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't let us do that.
Why not? What was the reason?
I don't know. They're very short on resources. There's the whole defunding that happened here in Los Angeles of the police, and they don't have enough cops to do what they need to do, and they don't get the help they need from the social media people to find out who these people are. And in Los Angeles, you can carry around a certain amount of drugs and get caught selling them, and you get a traffic ticket. So the dealers carry around that much. And if they get done by the cops, they go back home with their ticket and they go back out for business.
But the dealer in this case, law enforcement was able to determine who it was, right? Or you were, or how did that come about?
Right. So after the Instagram thing went viral, the television kicked in, and eventually Snapchat relented. The police told us they don't even contact them anymore because they don't help, right? And Snapchat heard about our son on the television and cooperated with the Santa Monica police. The Santa Monica police issued the search warrants and cased the house of the guy, put a case together, found who they thought was guilty, and sent it to the district attorney, opening a murder case, because it is a case of poisoning, right? And the district attorney decided not to prosecute. We don't officially know why. The district attorney doesn't speak to us. We've had no contact with him whatsoever.
I know they can be tough cases to bring to trial. That's what I was told anyway. And I was lucky in that the intermediate dealer who provided the deadly fentanyl to my daughter was prosecuted, but not for her, specifically for her death, although he was federally prosecuted and received 10 years. And then the dealers above him were responsible for several deaths, but were prosecuted for just a few. And they also received, one of them got 20 years, and the other one got life. They were bringing crack cocaine and heroin laced fentanyl into my community from Chicago. But I think that's rare. I think it's rare where I talk to so many parents now. It didn't take away my grief knowing, because first of all, the intermediate guy that my daughter and her boyfriend got these drugs from, he overdosed, and on the same day she did, he didn't die because he overdosed in a public restroom in a grocery store. But it didn't do anything to ease my grief. But I am grateful that these people are, hopefully that guy's getting help, and hopefully the other dealers, are, at least they're not on the streets to provide this. Although it seems like someone pops up as soon as you put away someone else pops up to provide these things anyway. It's such a vicious thing that we're dealing with here.
Well, a really important part of my grief journey was letting go of that vengeance, that need to punish, and trying to turn it into warning parents, because I knew that so many parents did not understand the dangers of fentanyl and the dangers of social media. Children are getting bullied, committing suicide because of social media. The sexual predators are going after our girls. The social media the companies don't care. They just care about how many users they have. That's how they get paid. So Snapchat's last earnings release had their stock price jump 40%. Their users were up 20%. More and more people are dying with Snapchat in the middle. Right now, it's considered like the phone company, where you can't sue for what's said on it, right? That's the Internet Decency Act, Section 230, treats them as neutral. And if we could just change that, and people like us could sue Snapchat for what happens on their platform, for not preventing repeat crimes and shutting these profiles down for good, this problem would fix itself. Like, the courts have a way of taking care of this stuff if you let them.
Now, Snapchat did say at the beginning of this year that they are going to put some new safety measures in place, not allowing young people to add someone that they don't know or something like that. Do you think that's enough?
I think they're handling this as a PR issue. They're not taking the sort of action that you would take to actually limit the drug activity. it keeps growing. So it almost isn't worth analyzing what they put out, because the only thing that matters is more and more children are dying. And so whatever they're doing, it's ineffective. I could go through each tool and show you why they don't really work. So the ones where only 16-year-olds can friend other 16-year-olds and under, all you have to do is create a false profile and say you're 16 and you're the drug dealer that's in that crowd. So what's needed is a cross-platform solution like bark.us, that's their website, where you can know if it's happening on Spotify, if it's happening on Facebook, if it's happening on TikTok, if the word suicide is typed in, if a drug emoji is used, because the kids are using emojis now to communicate this. A plug is plug me in. You go on Snapchat, you put a plug emoji out there, you'll have 10 drug dealers trying to sell you something in a heartbeat.
And parents can't afford to be in the dark, and they also can't afford to condone experimentation. That's what I think now more than ever. When we were younger, you, like you said, you could do something, you could try something, you probably were not going to die. Your chances of dying now, just taking one pill, as in the case with Sammy and other people that I know. I mean, it's just, I try to talk to kids about this, and even illegal marijuana being laced with fentanyl, because it's, weed has become such a part of our culture now, like alcohol. I often say if dealers were going into bars and putting fentanyl in people's alcohol and they were dropping over dead, I mean, what would we be doing as a country, right? And it just seems like how many young people, how many children do we have to lose? How many families have to go through what we've been through before we see a shift? That's what bothers me most, I think.
We put a open letter out to the President of the United States from families who have lost children to fentanyl poisoning, asking him to change the policies that are allowing fentanyl to come across our borders, and to use his power as the chief law enforcement agent of the country to do something about the dealers and the last mile solution that the social media companies are. We haven't heard back. But there are federal policies in play now that are feeding into this epidemic and causing a lot of it. That you can see the state of Texas trying to stop. Governor Abbott is a leader in trying to quell the fentanyl outbreak, trying to arrest the people who mule it across and put it at the top of their to-do list and seize as much as they can.
To me, politics doesn't have there's no room for politics in any of this. I mean, we just need to do what's right and what will save the lives of young people. Because the other thing that always strikes me, and I talk about this a lot, but it just gets me right in the heart, is it's just not, my daughter was amazing and Sammy was amazing. It's just not our kids and their amazing personalities and all the gifts that they had. It's all of these young people. And you think about what could have been invented, what could have been written, what music could have been composed. All of these things, we are losing all of that as a society with all these young people dying. And I just don't, when are we going to wake up? That's
right. And it's both sides love to yell from the highest petard and do nothing.
We do.
It's both sides, really. Politicians feed at the trough of these big technology companies, and things have gotten out of hand. The laws were written before any of this stuff happened, right? We didn't know what to guard against when these laws were written, and they must be revised to protect our children.
100%. We need more action, stronger action, louder voices. I mean, I don't know what it's going to take, but I feel sometimes like I'm shouting from the rooftops, and I have been for the last 4 years. And I see more and more people dying every year, and it's disheartening. It really is.
Well, like I said, we've started a community of parents who have gone through this, and it grows every single day. And we've also found some leaders, some people who've come up with solutions and are pushing them across country and have created their own 501c3 companies to make this happen. So there's a larger and larger group, unfortunately, of people like you and I who are experiencing these tragedies. And eventually the politicians are going to have to listen to us because we're not going away.
Right. I feel like there has to come a tipping point, at some point in this journey that we're on. And I've been on your Facebook page. I think I'm a member. So I'm a member of a lot of these groups. I feel like there are so many of us now. That is one thing parents can know. You talked earlier when we first started talking about, would have, could have, should have, guilt, regret, all of those things. And I think the one thing we have to do away with is shame. Now, I know your wife being a public figure, I'm in the public eye. I've been hammered at from people, who just don't like me or some work I'm doing that has nothing to do with Emily's hope, that try to use my daughter's death and the way she died against me. I just feel like there's so many of us now, like there's no room for shame. Do you know what I'm talking about? Has your family received comments or things like, oh, well, they decided to try the pill or they decided to do this and so they deserve to die kind of thing? I mean, I've heard that. I can't tell you how many times in the last 4 years.
Yeah, well, that's what a sort of online administrator is for. So I mine our page, and when some Weisenheimer comes on and says something that's untherapeutic, we erase it and excuse them from the group. There are people who believe that it's the kid's fault, and it is the kid's fault. They made some decisions, and they obviously are suffering the consequences. But it's not like we don't know that. And like saying unkind things is going to jar us into some understanding that we don't already have. It's just being unkind. You form a therapeutic group, you find your support groups, and you don't let people like that in. And when they get in, you don't let them get to you.
Yeah, I wish I could just eliminate those kinds of comments in general across all platforms. I see them, hear them, that kind of thing. And I just think it perpetuates that stigma surrounding why people would take something in the first place, right? Which usually has to do with mental health. So, yeah.
Well, there are two groups now, right? There's the group of people who've been addicted to drugs for a long time and segued into fentanyl, accidentally overdosed, right? And then there are the children who are trying something and got poisoned.
Well, and in my daughter's case, she definitely had a substance use disorder. And we had been trying since about the age of 15 to redirect her to find her help, but, to no avail. And unfortunately, she was ashamed of the fact that she was using what she was using. I only knew about weed and Xanax. I didn't know she was using something stronger. And she never intended to die. She wasn't trying to get fentanyl. So there's a lot of gray areas in all of this and who's using, why they're using, how much they've used, and how they die.
Right.
But yes, you're right. Some people do seek out fentanyl now, which blows me away. You have people who are addicted seeking out fentanyl. And I just think, I think those people honestly care more about the high than whether they live or die, which is so sad because, as you probably know, addiction takes over the brain, and it's just incredibly sad that we don't know how to treat people in better ways.
That's the danger of fentanyl. It's stronger than heroin. It's more addictive than heroin. And so if you try it once, you're addicted the same way you are with heroin. And
Right.
So, the one thing I guess that we don't have to experience is children who are addicted for life to fentanyl, because that is what's happening around the country, is that people accidentally try it and then they have to have more. And that's why they're putting it out there, because it's easy to mule across the border, because it's very compact and it's highly addictive. So if you don't kill your customer, you've got them for life.
Yes, exactly. And while yes, it's coming in across the border, it's also coming in on planes and on ships, and there are all kinds of ways to get it into this country. China continues to sell the raw ingredients to Mexico where it's manufactured. I did have a DEA agent tell me recently that labs are popping up in the US, fentanyl labs in storage units that they've seen here and there. So I think we just have to have everyone understand there has to be an education process that goes on so that nobody's giving these drug dealers business anymore. I mean, I think that is ultimately what needs to happen, especially with kids, especially.
Yeah. Well, right now we've got bullets being shot at our kids in the form of fentanyl, and we got the
That's true.
social media companies as the rifle. And between the two of them, it's a bigger challenge than all of the parents can handle. You can try and keep your kids off of social media, but then they'll be out of touch with their friends. And you can try and stop the flow of drugs to your children, like we all do. And some of it slips through, especially now that they're delivering and they can reach every kid sitting in their bedroom. It's a whole new world, and it's not pretty.
Right. Well, I love what you're doing in Sammy's honor and honor of his life and the things that you're trying, to push through and to change. You've got this, what's it called? Sammy's Law
Sammy's
that you'd
Law, yeah.
like to see through
That,
Congress. Tell me a little bit about how that would work exactly.
right. So we're pushing for Sammy's Law, which is a social media rule that would require platforms with children integrate with parent monitoring software. Right now, the platforms that our children are on do not allow for parents to know what's going on. There is software available that you can put on. Facebook allows it on. But the platforms that don't allow it on are TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram's messaging service, and Microsoft's Discord gaming platform. All of those are populated with children. And so we're pushing in the United States Congress with the help of Debbie Wasserman Schultz leading the effort there. And in the California legislature, which state houses so many of the technology companies.
Why do you think the technology companies will not voluntarily do this?
Because they don't have to, and they get paid per user. So if they shut down the drug activity, if they let parents look in, if they shut down the bullies or the sex traffickers, every one of those moves would reduce the number of users. Those users would go to another platform that didn't have those rules. That's why you need a cross-platform solution like parent monitoring software, so that your kid doesn't just jump to another platform as soon as one platform does the right thing.
That's what I was thinking. Like the next platform will pop up and their selling point will be, hey, nobody can monitor what you're doing on here. I mean, it's just,
right.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
we've spoken to the head of Snapchat about this, and he says that he's worried about privacy, and I tried to let him know the whole issue is children only have as much privacy as their parents allow. And
Right.
we're trying to undo some of the privacy that you've given them and the drug dealers to interact together. And that shouldn't be allowed. And you have to decide, I told him, whether you're going to be just a rich man with a tainted soul because of all the children who've died along the way, or whether you're going to do something to help your own society.
Well, and I don't think that I've never been a parent who thought children are entitled to a right to privacy. I've always thought it's my job to know what they're doing and to keep them safe. I mean, how are you going to keep your kids safe when they can have a secret life, right?
Yeah, well, we give them privacy in their bathroom. We give them the amount of privacy
Well, yes,
that's
of course.
age appropriate,
Right, of
and
course.
we meet it out. The responsible kid gets more privacy, and the one that's messing up gets less. And
Sure.
that's what parenting is all about. And we have a huge amount of interference from the social media companies in what we're doing as parents.
I wondered also, I talked to a lot of moms on this podcast, and there's a lot of groups just for mothers out there. You may have seen some of them on Facebook and different places. And we don't always hear from dads. And I should preface that by saying, out of the last 4 podcasts I had or so, I've talked to dads. So that's kind of starting to change a little bit. Do you think fathers and mothers handle this differently, grieve differently, react differently? What do you think?
I think everybody grieves differently. I think men try and be more stoic, but it's not unusual for a woman to be more stoic than her husband in this situation. So, everybody grieves their own way. There's no right or wrong to it. I know our son grieved differently. How you were exposed to the end of life also has a big effect on whether you've got post-traumatic stress or not, anxiety, depression. These are the things that people suffer from after something like this has happened. And yes, inside couples, they invariably grieve differently. But I've spoken to a lot of couples who've gone through this, and sharing your life with someone who doesn't share this grief isn't a plus. It's an understanding and a support of each other that is worth maintaining.
And you have two other children?
Yes, Ethan and Jackson.
Yeah, and I've got three other kids. How are your kids? Are they younger or older than Sammy?
So one's older, one's younger, and the younger one discovered his brother laying on the floor. So he had a tough first year, saw more than he should have.
Yeah. And so how have you found it best to help him?
So therapy is what you can do. Give them the space to be whoever they need to be at this time. Grief counseling in particular, not just any therapy. It's out there and it's worth seeking out, because it's a specialization, like so many things in medicine and psychiatry. And the more important advice you get at that time, the better. I see people drowning in vengeance and guilt, and they could use a hand. They could use someone who's been through it before and can tell them ways to feel better.
I found that my other children are all college age. So Emily's brothers and sister are all college age now. And it seemed like the healthiest thing for them actually was to kind of, once they left the house and kind of had their own life and their own, I don't know, that seemed to be very healthy for them, because like your family, my family's, at least in my community, well known, and everybody knew what happened to their sister. And that became somewhat of a burden for them. I think that that's maybe something that doesn't happen to everybody, where it becomes sort of a burden that wherever I go, people are going to know, they're going to ask about my sister. They're going to know about my sister. And them going off and kind of having their own life, so to speak, their own thing that they're doing, while it doesn't lessen the grief for them any, I think it does help them not being so public. Everyone doesn't necessarily know who they are, their story, or what happened in their family. That's been something unique maybe to my family.
Well, it happened during the pandemic, so we were all shut in, and he got a lot better when he finally was released from the house and back at school and playing sports and seeing his friends. So our youngest son, sort of had a rebirth like so many kids when the pandemic was over. And during the pandemic, it's very hard to heal from something like this, just shut in and sort of wallowing in whatever the hell is going on around the world and in your own home.
Right. I think that is one thing I wrote about in a blog early on, was just even the grieving process, when I had so many people, because Emily died in 2018. People came to my house, they came to the funeral, and then I saw what happened with funerals, especially during the early parts of the pandemic. And I just thought, to not have that support, to not have those people come physically, to be with you, is just, it's not fair to the grieving. And to be shut in like that, even I felt like I took a huge step back psychologically, where maybe I had been moving forward in my grief, not moving on, but moving forward. But when the pandemic hit, it's like, wow, things seemed worse again, and I just think, hard for everybody.
It was terrible. And there were all the things you can't imagine, so many dead people that you can't get through the system of burying or having a funeral. I'm a member of the Young Presidents Organization, and some of my chapter members were bringing us dinner in the first week so that we wouldn't have to cook, being very sweet to us. But they'd have to leave it on the doorstep and go away so that we wouldn't infect each other, So we couldn't even really bury our son for months and months and months. And, that's just terrible. That was happening all over the country. It's one of the worst parts.
And compounding the grief. I feel like that makes, like, there is a reason why we all come together when somebody, especially when somebody young dies.
Yeah,
People show up, right? But they couldn't, and then you didn't feel that support and that love because you didn't have those personal interactions. It's just,
that's right.
yeah.
We ultimately did, as soon as we were able to, but it was delayed for months, and it was something hanging over our heads.
Is there something that you do or that you found to be healing individually or as a family, to remember Sammy? I mean, that first year is hard. You have birthdays, holidays, death date. I mean, all these things, and those things continue to be hard as
Yeah,
well. But I think
yeah,
we're all looking for ways, to kind of get through that and to kind of honor the life of the person who left us too soon, too young.
yeah. Well, that's that shouldn't be the most important part in the beginning, because you're so damaged that you need your own healing, right? And they're already gone. So they're not suffering anymore, but you are. And so taking care of yourself is the main thing at the beginning. And then honoring the life, if it can come, it should come. And going through the ceremonies that our society wants to, being having a funeral or sitting shiva or whatever it may be, you know, do those things. But the idea that you need to do something beyond taking care of the ones who are left while you're all in crisis, don't do that. Just make sure you're there for the living, including yourself.
Does the advocacy that you're doing, does that help?
Well, I can tell you, it's re-traumatizing, right? Talking
Mm-hmm.
about it again makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a rally to recall the LA district attorney the other day, and I couldn't even speak publicly. I was like crying in front of all of these people. And so that part is hard, but it did help me let go of the feeling of vengeance. And I think that that's toxic. And the people who are prosecuting lawsuits and over involved in the police work, I see that extending their grief and the negative feelings.
Yeah, I understand completely what you say about being re-traumatized. I always say my training as a journalist allows me to do this because I think every journalist suffers from PTSD, especially if you've been on the scenes of accidents and fires and murders and drownings, right? And then we have to talk about it. This case is very personal for me, but when I tell Emily's story, I feel very committed to telling Emily's story, especially to students, young people, to try to warn them, don't ever take anything or experiment or do anything like this. But it is definitely, it takes me right back there, and it takes me some time to recover. And society doesn't always allow us that time.
No, no. And everyone's on their own journey. It's going to be a mix
Yeah.
of taking care of yourself, taking care of others, honoring your loved one. But the main thing is to put yourself and your other young ones and your relationship, your partner,
Mhm.
first. Take care of each other, get through it together, and even if you need some alone space, allow for all of that.
You're right. You do have to take care of yourself first, like putting your own oxygen mask on, right? So that you can take care of others first in your family. And then if you have the energy and the wherewithal to take care of the whole world, which really was what you're trying to do with Sammy's Law and with, monitoring social media for parents. I mean, really, that is what you're trying to do, is to save other kids. And
Right.
that's a commendable, very commendable endeavor. And I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. And I think just bringing awareness, getting parents to talk to their kids too, is they just hear this conversation and then they sit down and they say, hey, these are out here, and here's somebody that might contact you or want this or that. That's just something that doesn't always get done either. So while yes, we want to see the better monitoring, and yes, we want to let parents know there's at least one monitoring service out there over multiple platforms, they also need to talk to their kids too.
That's right. And get those username and passwords, or take back the computer and the phone. You need emergency contact information, if you will, for cybersecurity.
Well, thank you for taking the time today, and thank you for everything that you're doing and just I think this all is in honor of your son's life. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, the same to you and all that you do. And thank you for putting Sammy's story out there. It means a lot to us.
Well, I feel very grateful to be able to do so. Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Grieving Out Loud. Connect with us online at emilyshope.foundation. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider giving us a positive review. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage.